You know, there are some writers whose stories feel like waking dreams. You're reading about making spaghetti one minute, and the next, a cat starts talking to you, or you're getting a phone call from a woman who might not even exist. That's the world of Haruki Murakami. He's this global literary phenomenon, always talked about for the Nobel Prize, and a true master of blending our everyday, mundane lives with the beautifully bizarre and surreal. So, let's dive in. And right there, in his own words, you get the key to his entire philosophy. This idea of mesmerism, it's not just some artsy-fartsy concept. It's about a disciplined, almost meditative approach to life and work. It's the foundation for every single one of the unique worlds he creates. You've got to understand, before he was this world-famous author, Murakami was a young man in post-war Japan who felt, well, a little out of place. He was more into American jazz and Russian novels than his own country's literary scene. So his story, it doesn't start in a library. It starts in a smoky, late-night jazz bar. So let's paint a quick picture. He's born in 1949, moves to Tokyo for college, and then he and his wife Yoko do something pretty unconventional. Instead of getting regular jobs, they decide to open a small jazz club. They call it the Peter Cat. And for the next 7 years, that club was their entire world. I mean, just think about that for a second. Until he was almost 30 years old, Haruki Murakami wasn't a writer. He was a small business owner. His life was scored by the sounds of Miles Davis and Art Blakey, pouring drinks and talking to people deep into the Tokyo night. Writing novels? It wasn't even a blip on their radar. And this is so crucial. This is where he learned how to write. His prose, it's not just influenced by music. He actually builds it like a jazz song. It starts with the rhythm of the sentences, then you get the harmony of the themes, and then his signature move, that free improvisation. It all started right there in the Peter Cat. So how does a jazz bar owner become a literary superstar? Well, every great story has that one moment, right? That turning point where everything changes. For Murakami, it wasn't some huge, dramatic event. It was something beautifully simple, something that happened on a sunny afternoon at a baseball game. Seriously, what does? Is it years of planning and studying? Or is it something else? Something that just comes out of nowhere, like a flash of lightning? So picture it. He's just sitting there in the outfield, enjoying the game. The bat makes that perfect crack, the ball soars through the air, and an American player named Dave Hilton slides into second base. And in that split second, a thought just pops into his head, clear as day. You know what? I could write a novel. And that's the magic of his origin story, isn't it? It wasn't a logical choice. It was this feeling, this inspiration that just flew down from the sky, and he simply decided to accept it. That night, he went home, sat down at his kitchen table, and just started writing. So he gets this message from the sky, and what does he do? He completely blows up his life. He sells the jazz bar and commits himself 100% to the craft of writing. And this wasn't a casual change. It was an absolute transformation, built on this iron will and a discipline that is now the stuff of legend. I mean, just look at the contrast. It's night and day, literally. He goes from this nocturnal life of smoke-filled rooms to this Spartan existence, waking up at 4 a.m., running marathons. He realized that to write these huge, complex novels, you had to be physically strong. He called it survival training. It wasn't just about art, it was about endurance. And this routine, this became his mesmerism. This is the engine room. It's what's powered decades of incredible books. For him, it's not about waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about showing up every single day and doing the work. And this new life, it absolutely paid off. In 1987, he published a book called Norwegian Wood, and it just exploded. Murakami went from being this respected writer to a full-blown cultural icon in Japan. But here's the twist. The very success he'd worked for became its own kind of prison. 2 million plus copies. Just think about that number for a second. This book, which was actually a very realistic story about love and loss, struck a massive chord with young people. And suddenly, this man who valued solitude and quiet above all else was a household name. And he just couldn't handle it. The private, disciplined life he had so carefully built for himself was suddenly under attack. So he did what so many of his characters do when the world gets to be too much. He left. He started this long period of self-imposed exile, living in Europe and then America. What's so wild is that even as he's becoming this global icon, back home in Japan, he's still seen as an outsider. His books were full of Western pop culture, and his style was just so different from the traditional Japanese literature of the time. It set him apart. And I think that's a position he kind of learned to live with, maybe even embrace. It was actually during his time away from Japan that he wrote some of his most famous and deeply surreal books, like the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. This is where he really perfected what we now call the Murakami universe, this incredible world that's governed by its own strange, mesmerizing logic. So people throw this term around a lot, right? Magical realism. What does it even mean? Well, with Murakami, it's actually pretty simple. His stories are totally grounded in reality. The characters are making spaghetti, listening to records, doing laundry, and then, just seamlessly, the fantastical creeps in. A man-sized frog shows up, or a dry well in the backyard becomes a portal to another dimension. And if you read enough of his books, you start to see these motifs pop up again and again. These lonely guys, often searching for a missing woman, who get pulled into these bizarre parallel worlds. And it's always through the most ordinary things. A phone call, a dry well, or, even a simple conversation with a cat. It makes you feel like you're in this single, huge, interconnected universe. So what is the legacy of this guy, the jazz club owner turned literary marathon man? Well, I think it's the legacy of an author who created a truly global voice by looking inward. And in doing that, he found a way to talk about the universal feelings of loneliness and searching that kind of define all of our modern lives. The numbers really do speak for themselves. I mean, over 50 languages, millions and millions of copies sold. It just goes to show that a story about some ordinary guy in Tokyo can connect with people absolutely everywhere, from Kyoto to Kansas City. And that was his great innovation, wasn't it? He took all these things he loved, American pop culture, different writers, all that jazz music, and he filtered it all through this uniquely Japanese lens. And what came out the other side was something totally new, something that showed a whole new generation of writers what was possible. Which, when you boil it all down, brings us to the one question that seems to haunt almost every one of his novels. It's about that space between people, the gap between what we say and what we really feel. In a world full of parallel universes and talking animals, maybe the greatest mystery of all is the person right next to us. But his work isn't bleak, not at all. In the end, Murakami always leaves us with this quiet, profound sense of hope. The idea that, maybe we can never fully bridge that gap between ourselves and other people, but the effort to connect, to try and understand, to just listen, that's where we find meaning. That's the first step.